Happy Saturday, everybody. So, I had a phone call from my sister this morning who got a knife off me recently and rather distraughtly saying, somebody stuck it in the dishwasher. In fact, actually, she started the phone call with somebody broke into my house, which made me go, ah! But I think that was more to the point that there's 4 other members in her house, 3 of which are perfectly capable of using the dishwasher, and somebody put her recent paring knife into the dishwasher and nobody knows who. So she found it in the dishwasher this morning, and let's see what it looks like and do a little bit of a clean up, shall we? So let's get rid of some of the other ones. Let's get a little bit of light on this situation. So I'm pleased to say that let's just spin you all around, make you all feel a bit sick. Pleased to say that my stabilised timber, having gone through the dishwasher, is still in remarkably good condition. So there is a few things here which I found I would like to highlight anyway. Things like this here. This is mallee burl, stabilised mallee burl. You can see I did a 2-tone, so I did a blue, well, it was a greeny blue, for one soak, and then went to clear resin for 4 soaks after that. So this is well and truly stabilized, but it sort of points out the fact some people think that when you stabilize something that it essentially turns it to plastic. Now this is cactus juice that this is stabilized in, and you can see these are where there was the natural cracks in the mallee burl that often happen in the oven where they open up, and they fill with cactus juice. And even though this is totally stabilized, you can see the color right the way through it. These parts here where you can't see color, that's where it was the most dense timber. And actually, to be brutally honest, sometimes I'm not sure they ever get any resin into them, which is why you see lots of timbers like those bird's eyes and that sort of thing that have a timber color in them still. Now this one, it's likely that had clear in it because this got, like I say, 1 round of blue and then several rounds of clear. But what it does is it actually timber is still timber, regardless of whether you stabilize it. It's still a natural product, even though it's got a lot of plastic in it. So it is going to move some. Now you know it's stabilized because if it wasn't, it probably would have separated completely from this resin. Now there's not even a raised edge here, which is lovely. But you can see these little gaps that have appeared. So I'm just going to do like a little quick restoration of this knife. And fill these. There's another little one there. Another little one there, but apart from that, we're all good. So I'm going to do a tidy up of this blade and give it back. And because this is a sharp knife, it's a user, I'm going to wrap it up before I do any work to the handle so I don't end up slicing myself a nice new orifice in my hand, which nobody wants to see and I don't want to do. So I'm just going to wrap it. I can't talk right because I had tape in my mouth. Like so. Now who knows who put this in the dishwasher. I'm not going to go blaming anyone particularly, not Dolly at all. You know how it is. It's one of those things, kitchen knives, you should never put a kitchen knife in the dishwasher, but we all have very busy lives and we can quite easily, without thinking, just be loading the dishwasher or something like that and just throw everything without really considering what's going in there. So it's one of those things that, to be honest, I think this is the first time I've had a knife go in the dishwasher. And when my sister rang this morning and said it's gone for the dishwasher, I was interestingly quite excited about it because I've wanted to see what it does. And I know of a couple of makers who actually stick a knife in the dishwasher and just let it do multiple runs. Like it's not one for selling. It's just one that they're going to get rid of, or one that they're just purely made for that point. But I'm not one of those guys. I don't make enough knives to be able to feel like I can throw them away, but it's a lovely it's actually quite a nice thing to be able to see what happens when one of your blades goes through the dishwasher, that it's good nick. And what it does is tell me that my stabilizing is good, because I know exactly what would happen if I put a piece of average mallee burl unstabilized. Now this was a 40 by 45 block, so if this was a lot of other people's stabilizing, I would put money on the fact that this bit would be completely unstabilized. But because I know that I stabilize all the way through, this is the very core, this is the middle bit that often doesn't get stabilized with a lot of other people who are sort of lightly into stabilizing have. So I'm going to give it a sand down. Now I'm going to pretty lightly sand this because of the fact that it's only, well, it's not damaged as such, it's just got a few patches where you can feel those edges. So all I'm going to do is I'm starting with an 800 grit. Alright, so now I've cleaned it up. You can actually see all those cracks. They now don't have... basically, that was the timber gave obviously the slightest movement, but I've sanded back, even though it was only a tiny bit that I sanded beyond the crack. The only one that shows a little bit of residual sort of, you can just get your finger, I can't even get my fingernail in it actually. Like, you can just catch it with your fingernail. I could probably sand that one further down again, but there's actually no need to do that. I'll give this one a little bit of time to dry, and then I'll be putting some of the Uncle Bjorn's handle finish straight on it. So it's a two-part for anyone who hasn't used it. It has a resin and an oil, like a lubricant. So you put a couple of layers of this one on, and that will fill any little tiny imperfections in the timber. So that's a 1200 grit. I've sanded that too. You can go right up to a couple of thousand with this stuff without any issue. So I put a couple of layers of that on, and then I'll put some of this with a little bit of that mixed onto it for the few remaining coats. Now, if you're at all worried about any sort of residue left on it, you might have noticed when I scraped it with my finger, kind of left a little fingernail mark, which means there could have been some residue left on there from the terps, or the metho, sorry, I used. So this is just wax and grease remover, tire and grease remover, or wax and grease remover that you use when you're spray painting. So the important thing to do with any of this stuff, if you're going to try anything new, is just sort of touch it gently in a spot where you can see if it's going to affect it, somewhere where it isn't too important. Like the end of this, I could grind that off a little bit if I had to, but I've used this one before, so I'm not worried about it, but it's always worth checking those sorts of things. So with the handle finish, a couple of ways to start. You could start with a greaseproof paper. And greaseproof paper basically doesn't absorb the handle finish so fast, so you kind of aren't wasting as much into the fabric. To be brutally honest, it's a good idea, except I'm a fan of how the fabric finishes it better than the greaseproof paper, which you get a good finish, but I just prefer how this goes. And to be really honest, I use this a lot, and I've had this bottle for, I don't know, 6 months. I think it's like $40, $35, something like that. And if you listen to my podcast next week, you will find that you will be able to get a discount off this when you buy a bottle of this as a listener of my podcast. So all that said, I tend to use fabric still from start to finish. try to use something that's old and lint free. This is a t-shirt that I'm pretty definite my wife has had since we were like 15, so she's finally donated it to the workshop to be rags. Well, I hope she has, because I just found it in here and chopped it up, so I'm hoping that it wasn't accidentally dropped in the workshop for some silly reason. Otherwise I might be in trouble. It's positively an antique. So what you might see if you follow me on sort of Instagram or TikTok and those sorts of things, you might see me pouring a significant amount of this onto here. I actually only really do that for the TikTok videos just because it looks a bit sexy, but you don't actually need anywhere near that much. I tend to get a rag like this. I pour a few drips, not even much at all, maybe 5 or 6, probably that's even too much I would have thought, onto the rag, and then I just buff it on. Nice and evenly all over the handle. Making sure you get right into the edges, because you can wipe it off the blade afterwards, but I tend to protect my blades with tape so I don't need to. Something like this knife holder is very handy for just being able to keep moving it. Now I cannot for the life remember who made me this. It's very simple to make by the looks of it, but there was a guy on Facebook a while ago selling them for like $100 or something. It's dirt cheap. Technically you're supposed to leave it, but I mean it's already touch dry when you buff it in. So I actually use the same rag. I go over it again. Sometimes if you've got a thick coat it takes a little bit longer, but I'm working it particularly into those cracks so that I get a nice thickish coat on the cracks themselves, so that I know they're nice and full. When you're inexperienced at it, if you're not careful, you kind of end up with these sort of swirls and lumps and bumps. Just grab yourself a couple of 1000 grit sandpaper and go over it again. So what I do is I highly speed polish it, and you don't really get that issue. You can even shoe shine it. If you get those issues up here, you can just shoe shine the problem away. It doesn't help that my clamp isn't clamped down right now, but and then so once you've got the seg coat on, it starts to get a little tacky, so give it a few minutes. We'll let it dry. Alright, so then the next layer is, let's get a better angle. Next coat is both of these. So just get another clean bit of rag. I'll put some resin on there, a couple of drops of oil, and I want to sort of make sure that oil is evenly covering the resin, and then apply to the handle. Now, you can't do too many coats of this stuff. Man, if you want to put 35 coats on, feel free. I mean, I tend to do about 6, including the 2 original ones. I mean, I've probably in the past done 4, but 6 to 10 is great. I'll probably put a little bit more on this one just in case it goes through the dishwasher again. So what I've done is I've just wrapped a bit of fabric around this handle because it's dry, but it's still what I would call green, which just essentially means that if I was to hit it on something or dig a nail in, it might still be ever so slightly soft. So I just put some fabric on to protect it. There's actually a couple of tiny deflections in this blade where it's obviously hit some slightly harder stuff. I mean, it could be from being in the dishwasher, I don't know. I'm actually playing with some new belts that I bought. They are these crazy high micron, 1539 micron belts. They're like paper, almost like a transfer paper or something. So they should be fun. So I'm going to go with my normal finish, and then I jump 30, 15, and 9, which I think 9 is like 1,000 grit or something, and see how we go with that before I go to my leather strop. In reverse, and then that way I don't end up with a blade in my belly. Sharpen this one at about, it's about probably 19 degrees, something like that. Being a paring knife, it's pretty thin, and it also takes a bit of a beating, paring knives, so you could go a little thinner, but sort of 17 or something, but 19 to 20, 21 even is pretty good.